depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always, told out of Oyster Radio. So today we need to start a new series where we are looking at every World Championship winning deck in the run-up to the World Championships. I'm a bit busy in the run-up to the World Championships, so I'm going to give you one of these videos every morning for the next 4 days, showing you every World Championship winning deck, because you know what? That sounds like a lot of fun to me. So let's start off with the first real World Championships that happened in 2004 and was won by Sugiyoshi Yamato's, Magma Spirit deck. And basically what happened here was that this was a deck for which the Western players, US, Europe, etc., just weren't prepared and did not know how to handle it. Now, the big Pokemon here, of course, is your Groudon. You got your Pokebody Power Saver. Pokebody is what we used to refer to as abilities that were passive, as in always working. As long as the number of Pokemon in play that has Team Magma in its name is 3 or less, Team Magma's Groudon can't attack. So play a Team Magma deck. Sorted. 2 energy, 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, or 50 damage, or 70 if there's already 20 damage on, which is where linear attack comes in. And I should mention, this deck won all 3 age divisions at the 2004 World Championships. People were just not ready for it. What else did we have in the deck? Well, we had Team Magma Zangoose that let you either search your deck for a basic Pokemon that was colorless, or Team Magma and pop it on your bench. Great for setting up this deck. We had Team Play that did 10 damage for each Pokemon with Team Magma in its name, which was, your whole deck. We had a Claydol that let you move an energy from your Pokemon with Team Magma in its name to another one of your Pokemon, letting you move energy around, switching between attackers. That sounds like fun. And then Dark Hand did 60 if you had more cards in your hand than your opponent. We had ourselves Team Magma's Camerupt that let you search your discard pile for a basic energy card and attach it to Team Magma's Camerupt at the cost of 2 damage counters. And then, of course, you could move it from Camerupt to wherever you wanted using Team Magma's Claydol, which honestly sounds like a lot of fun to me. And you mainly just smash with Groudon here and you win. Don't forget we had Magma Energy that could only be attached to a Pokemon with Team Magma in its name, and it was 2 fighting and or darkness energy. It only lasts a turn, but still pretty useful for Groudon in the early game. We had stuff like Team Magma Ball that let you flip a coin, and if heads, search your deck for a Pokemon with Team Magma in its name. If tails, a basic Pokemon with Team Magma in its name. Either way, you're getting some benefit there. We had Maxi that let you search your hand or discard pile for a Team Magma Pokemon, whack it on your bench, and if it was a stage 2 you had to put 2 damage counters on. That sounds fine to me. And we got Team Magma's Conspirator, lets you search your deck for up to 2 in any combination of basic Pokemon with Team Magma in its name and basic energy, show them to your opponent, pop them in your hand, and shuffle your deck. Lots of specific Team Magma cards here that helped out massively in your deck that was, and I've shown you all of the Pokemon in the deck, they are all Team Magma. A shout out as well quickly to Desert Ruins, and any time between turns, each player puts 1 damage counter on his or her Pokemon EX with a maximum HP of at least 100, and then remember what Groudon's second attack does. Yeah, Pulverize liked this. Now, moving into 2005, we saw another surprise deck win the World Championships. It was the Queendom deck that won the World Championships, piloted by Jeremy Moron. However, we also saw a top 4 finish for Pablo Meza Alonso. Yes, that Pablo, the one who is a Pokemon TCG commentator right now. And a top 32 finish from Adam Capriola, who you may know as the person who, made 6 prizes, also PKMN cards, which is amazing. Yeah, this deck came out of nowhere and had 3 top finishes. And it was a deck that nobody saw coming. It didn't win all 3 age divisions. That would have been weird because it was a big surprise. But it did have 2 top 4 finishes in Masters. Now, what we had here was your Nidoqueen. And Nidoqueen said that as long as the Nidoqueen is in play, it reduces your retreat cost of all your Nidoqueen family and all of that fine. But Toxic, single energy, Poison, but 2 damage counters instead of 1. And Power Lariat, 40 damage, plus 10 more for each evolved Pokemon you have in play. Which evolved Pokemon do you go for? Mostly Pidgeot, honestly. Mostly we're looking for Pidgeot, because that had the Poké Power Quick Search that let you search any card from your deck and put it into your hand, limited to once per turn. Why yes, that does look a lot like the Pidgeot we're going to see at the World Championships this year. And then we also had Mewtrick, that when you played Mewtrick from your hand of one of your Pokemon, you could remove all damage counters from all of your Pokemon and your opponent's Pokemon, other than EXs, and you'll notice this deck does not play any EXs, which is fun. It does play Desert Ruins to put damage counters on EXs, but again, you're not playing any EXs. It took advantage of double Rainbow Energy that had to go onto an evolved Pokemon other than EXs, but then was 2 energy at a time. Now, it did reduce the damage you did by 10, but that was not a huge problem, honestly, because you're doing huge damage and you're taking advantage of all your other tricks here. And bearing in mind, Nidoqueen's a stage 2 of 120, so you can already see how well this is going to build up as we go. Also worth noting, Mr. Briney's Compassion let you pick up a Pokemon other than an EX. Again, all of your Pokemon non-EXs here. A Great Ball that searches for a basic Pokemon other than an EX. And what you're basically doing here is you've got a really good stage 2, you've got Pidgeot for your consistency, and a bunch of cards that you can take advantage of or that your opponent can get hurt by, because they're playing EXs and you aren't. Now, 1 year later, in 2006, Worlds would be won for the first time by Jason Klaczynski. As we go through this series, you are going to hear his name come up a couple more times. But this was the first win in 2006 with Mewtrick, which was a deck all built around Mew EX and Mewtrick EX. That was the point here. It was very much a deck that played around those 2 Pokemon. And what we had here was obviously Mew. Now, this was Mew EX. Unlike the Queendom deck, this was an EX heavy deck. And the Pokebody Versatile let you use the attacks of all Pokemon in play as long as you had the necessary energy. Cool. You could also search for an energy and attach it to Mew and switch to the bench, but mostly we're copying here. And then you've got Mewtrick EX, that for 2 energy does 40 damage and stops your opponent playing trainer cards. Or 3 energy, discard all lightning, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon, deal 80 damage. Well, you can do a lot here using Mewtrick or Mew to copy Mewtrick and saying to your opponent, haha, gutted, no trainer cards for you. And there is an excellent blog online by Jason Klaczynski. I'll link it in the description. And the way Jason tells it, the deck relied almost entirely on one attack, Mewtrick's Disconnect. Because what we've got here is the supporter card Scott that searches your deck for up to 3 cards in any combination of supporter and stadium. And then there are 2 stadium cards that you want to use, bearing in mind that using Disconnect will lock them on the board for the entire game. We've got Battle Frontier that stops evolved, colorless, darkness, or metal Pokemon using Poké Powers or Pokebodies. And Cursed Stone that puts 1 damage counter on Pokemon with Poké Powers. Back then, Pokebodies were passive, they were always running. Poké Powers you had to actually use. And yeah, you took damage counters with Cursed Stone, or you turned off Poké Powers and Pokebodies in Battle Frontier, but you locked it into play and your opponent couldn't get rid of them, and then you went and won the game from there, and it was fun. You also played Roselia to make your opponent switch their active Pokemon. Reactive Aroma doesn't work because you don't actually play React Energy here, so that's kind of irrelevant. Regirock EX let you move a damage counter from Reggie EX, and then did decent damage as well. We had ourselves Girafarig that said active basic Pokemon can't use Poké Powers, especially good in the early game before you get your whole Mewtrick thing rolling. Also kind of fun that you could reorder the top cards of either player's deck. And then Holland's Magneton was an energy card. We saw this a lot back in the day, where you could attach it from your hand to a Pokemon with an energy card attached to it, and it counted as 2 energy. It was fun. It saw a huge amount of play. This was very much a deck which countered the top decks of the format, and it might have just been using Disconnect and locking stadiums in play, but it beat the other top decks around, and it won the World Championships. And let's finish this first episode in 2007 with Tom Roose's legendary Ascent. And if you're wondering why you've never heard of Tom Roose, essentially came out of nowhere, won the World Championships, disappeared. But what a run it was. I don't believe they're still playing, whereas obviously Jason Kaczynski won Worlds a couple more times and all of that. So what we had here with Legendary Ascent was the first real time we had a World Championships where there weren't any surprises. This was the best deck in the game, and Chris Fulop won US Nationals with basically this deck. And then we saw it winning as well at the World Championships, piloted by Tom Roose. Now, there were a bunch of different things going off in the deck, starting off with Absol EX. So Absol had the Poké Power Cursed Eyes, that when you put Absol EX from your hand onto your bench, you can move 3 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another. And then you got 2 energy, 30 damage, plus 10 to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon that already has damage counters on. You might be able to see where we're going with this. Rayquaza EX was a card that we saw coming in here. It was actually at the front of the pack when it was released as a Worlds deck. And it's got the Pokebody Rage Aura that if you've got more prize card left than your opponent, and if you're spreading damage around, you often will, you get to ignore all the colorless energy. So single energy, 30 to one of your opponent's Pokemon, 50 if they have a Poké Power or Pokebody, or 2 energy, 70. Sounds good to me. We've got the Mew that we saw back in Jason Kaczynski's winning deck, but of course here, instead of just copying one, you've got a myriad of different attacks to copy. And then we bring in the EVs. Jolteon EX, when you play it to evolve a Pokemon, you can put 1 damage counter on each Pokemon. Obviously, massively helpful for Absol, and that's why this is played as a 3 of, and the other EVs are played as 1 ofs. You can see where the spread damage comes in. Jolteon damages everything, Absol goes nuts. Espeon, and then an attack that does 20 damage plus 10 for each damage counter on the defending Pokemon. We've got Espeon, that when you evolve into it, you can choose an evolved Pokemon from your opponent's bench, remove the highest stage evolution card back to their hand, you're spreading damage, devolve one of their Pokemon, it will then hopefully get KO'd, which is fun. We've got Vaporeon EX, so when you evolve into it, you can have your opponent shuffle a hand into their deck and draw 4 cards, hopefully getting rid of their hand quite nicely, as well as an attack that kind of goes through anything. Resistance, Pokebodies, Pokepowers, all that good stuff. And it's worth mentioning we do have multi-energy here, so you can actually use any of those attacks, and with Mew you can switch between those attacks quite nicely. We've also got Jirachi EX, that while your opponent's got a Pokemon EX or Stage 2, you pay 1 energy less, so it's 30 damage, single energy. They can't use Poké Powers on their Pokemon next turn. So lots of Poké Power decks around. This really helped turn them off. Jolteon Star, when you benched it, you got to put a damage counter on each active Pokemon. Again, the synergy here with Absol is pretty obvious. And an attack which can give you some immunity next turn if you're into that. We did also see Holland's Castform and Voltorb attaching energy like I told you about previously. But this was also the deck, the first one we've seen in this video, in this series, that played the Holon engine. So the Holon engine was, well, you got Holon Transceiver, which was a trainer card, what we would now call item. Search your deck for a supporter card with Holon in its name, or your discard pile. And then you got a bunch of supporters like Holon's Mentor, which lets you search for basic Pokemon, or Scientist, that let you discard a card from your hand and then draw till you got the same number of cards as your opponent, or Adventurer, that let you draw 3 cards, or if you discarded a Pokemon with Delta, 4 cards instead. It was an engine which saw a redonkulous amount of play, so this was honestly really rather good. Now, of course, that was a whistle-stop tour through the first 4 Worlds winning decks. We cannot spend 20 minutes talking about each of them without doing an 80-minute video. But I'm going to come back hopefully literally tomorrow because I've just shown you the first 4 years of the World Championships winning decks. But you know what? It's time we had a little bit of a look at 2008 onwards. And that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. So for now, tell me what you think about these first 4 Worlds winning decks. Go nuts in the comment section, but be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. And get shout-outs on the channel, like the lovely Eric Ridgway, who's been a supporter of ours for a while now and is a very lovely person. So shout out to them for the support and the loveliness. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.